The member from Prince Edward Hastings.
Thanks, Speaker, and good morning. My question today is for the Premier. Last week, we learned that 9 companies bilked Ontario electricity customers out of $265 million. Now we know one of those companies is run by your government, Ontario Power Generation. OPG's turn at the trough cost electricity payers tens of millions of dollars in inappropriate expenses. That's after your government, Premier, was warned 5 times about the program that OPG was abusing. So, Speaker, my question to the Premier is this. Did her government ignore warnings from the Energy Board because they enjoyed collecting the money that OPG was wrongfully taking from electricity customers?
Minister of Energy.
Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're confident in the Ontario Energy Board and our system operator to run an efficient, reliable and fair electricity market for ratepayers across the province. And both the Real-Time Generation Cost Guarantee Program and the Congestion Management Settlement Credit play an extremely important role in our electricity system, Mr. Speaker. These programs are required to keep the electricity system reliable for families and businesses across the province and stable for our neighbours in other jurisdictions. If these programs were eliminated, reliability would be put at risk. When it comes to OPG, Mr. Speaker, they released a statement, and what they said was, in respect of some of what they thought were eligible costs, OPG repaid certain costs, claimed amounts after discussions concluded on what constituted eligible costs. OPG promptly repaid the amounts to the ISO in full in 2015.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Speaker, back to the Premier. The Minister of Energy may be confident in OPG, but the people of Ontario and the official opposition have no confidence, none, in this government to keep a watchful eye on what's happening, especially in the energy sector. The Energy Board issued 5 warnings to 4 different ministers of energy and 2 different premiers about the program that OPG was abusing. The government ignored all of them, Mr. Speaker. Now we find out that the government benefited to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. This at a time when electricity prices were skyrocketing. 600,000 Ontarians were behind on their bills. 60,000 were being cut off. Speaker, 4 ministers were warned, and 3 of them are still in Premier Wynn's cabinet.
Question.
How much would electricity ratepayers have to be out before the Premier finally held someone accountable?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Abuses within the system are completely unacceptable, and that's why the system operator has investigated those market participants, and where significant wrongdoing was present, compensation has been recovered and returned to ratepayers. $168 million of the $200 million in ineligible costs has been recovered by the ISO, Mr. Speaker. The total annual costs for the Real-Time Generator Cost Guarantee Program are now $23 million, down significantly from $61 in 2014, Mr. Speaker. And also, according to the December 2016 Market Surveillance Panel report, many of the most problematic issues associated with the Congestion Management Settlement Credit regime have been brought to an end, in large measure as a result of the panel having identified these situations and the ISO having acted to eliminate them. The Auditor General says our system operator doesn't act when the board's Market Surveillance Panel makes a recommendation, but the panel itself disagreed, Mr. Speaker.
Final supplementary.
Speaker, the Energy Minister said a lot right there, but what he didn't say was that he was going to go back and try and get the $92 million that's still outstanding. Electricity customers in Ontario have overpaid by that much. And Energy Minister after Energy Minister after Energy Minister after Energy Minister, 4 of them, and 2 premiers sat by idly and did nothing despite the warnings. As late as September 2016, ISO was still being told at public meetings that this program was a problem. When we tried to have the Justice Committee review the ISO this October, what did the government do? They said no and stood firmly against accountability. The Liberals didn't want electricity customers to know that they were benefiting from this abuse of the program. Speaker, the Premier has shown that she thinks she's above accountability. Does she actually think she's above the law, too?
Thank you. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, As stated before, abuses within the system are completely unacceptable, and that's why we have our system operator act on these programs, Mr. Speaker, and that's why the system operator investigated those market participants where there was significant market wrongdoing present. Compensation has been recovered, and it has been returned to ratepayers, Mr. Speaker, and one of the most egregious, they were fined a record $10 million, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we can recoup those costs for all ratepayers. But again, Mr. Speaker, more program updates are on the way in form of market renewal, Mr. Speaker. That again is rebuilding the foundation, and which will also increase the flexibility and efficiency within Ontario's electricity market, Mr. Speaker. The market renewal initiative is expected to result in more competitive marketplace that meets our system needs while increasing flexibility and efficiencies, and will always rely on the OEB and the system operator to keep the system in check.